welcome everybody to the 4th annual Love Local event, believe it or not. We've been doing this event for 4 years. I feel like it kind of just keeps getting better every year. So we're really excited about the program we have planned for you tonight. Did want to give a heads up that we're recording this evening. So we can share what happens tonight far and wide, throughout the rest of the week and beyond. I actually see a Kearsarge Food Hub sweatshirt. Victoria, there you go.
Yes.
Heck yes, love it. If anybody else is repping any KFH or Sweet Beet merch, or want to go pull some out, that is totally welcome.
Encouraged.
And encouraged, yes. Surprisingly, we are not. We are your hosts this evening. My name is Hannah. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at the Kearsarge Food Hub.
My name is France Hahn, and I'm the Executive Director, and we will be your host this evening.
Indeed, we will be guiding you this evening. And just once again, we're so glad you're tuning in and choosing to spend your time with us. We really believe in the messages and the stories that we're going to share tonight. And so we're really excited. But before we dig in, we would like to acknowledge where we are broadcasting from tonight.
We are on the unceded land of Endakina, which has long served as a site of meeting for Abenaki people for thousands of years. Kearsarge Food Hub honors, recognizes, and respects these Abenaki as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we live and work today. We commit to respecting and helping protect the lands within our use and share of the bounty with our Abenaki partners today.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so to give you a sense of what to expect, right, over the next couple hours, we have you here until 8 p.m. Hopefully you don't have to pop off earlier. But if you do, this is a safe space. You do what you have to do throughout the evening, of course. It's one of my favorite traditions here at the Kearsarge Food Hub to take this time at Love Local each and every year, right, to look outward from the work that we do every day in Bradford, New Hampshire, and shine a light on the incredible work being done by food system partners throughout the state and throughout New England. This year in particular feels really special. It's kind of a different take on Love Local. In the past, we've focused on farmers and makers, obviously incredible parts of our food system. But this year, we're taking a look at nonprofit food hubs and organizations working in the middle of the food system, doing work that is often unseen or overlooked, but nonetheless is incredibly important for building capacity to move food throughout our community. So we're going to explore what it means to work in the middle of the food chain tonight over these next couple hours. We're going to learn about these incredible organizations, but I definitely want to take a minute to acknowledge that, of course, we had a big election last week. There are certainly a spectrum of emotions that folks are feeling, regardless of how you chose to vote. And I just have found so much encouragement in remembering that the way that we build the world that we want to see does not begin or end with who we elect into office. And I just want to say that I feel so deeply honored to be doing this work, to be here with you, France, and all of you tuning in, to remind ourselves of the power that we have to create change, especially when we invest in our local and regional communities. And of course, we believe in starting the Kearsarge Food Hub that the food system on the local and regional level has tremendous power to reshape the world. And I'm so excited to dig in with you all tonight, exactly how we do that work. So to that end, we have a very dynamic program planned for you tonight. We hope that you stay engaged with us throughout the evening. We're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And before we kind of move forward with the schedule for the evening, we wanted to introduce our staff member, Katie. Katie, if you are on video, there you are, raise your hand. Katie is providing kind of the all-encompassing support that a Zoom room requires. She is here to manage the chat, and she is here to provide technical support. So thank you so much for being here, Katie. So tonight, we're going to start by laying the groundwork, so to speak. France and I are going to give a little background to the Kearsarge Food Hub, see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces. We'll talk about what our work is about here at KFH. But then we have something really exciting. It's our first ever subject matter expert. We have Seth
Hello,
Wilner. Hello, Seth. Hopefully you're blushing by now. That would be ideal. Seth works for the UNH Cooperative Extension and has for a couple decades. He is going to walk us through kind of what community-supported agriculture can look like. And that's going to be a really exciting conversation to start with and launch us into kind of the main attraction of our evening, which is going to be watching 3 short videos prepared about our featured organizations. So our featured organizations tonight are Food Connects. Hello, Richard. Hello, Donnie. Hey, Micah, you're here. Hello. Anyone from Food Connects, go ahead and give a wave. Then we're going to learn about Fresh Start Farms. So I know we have Tom here representing Fresh Start Farms. If we have any of the farmers here, go ahead and give a wave. And then we're going to finish up that portion learning about New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. Andrea Tomlinson is here. Hey, Andrea. Any Fisher folks tuning in tonight? Do you know?
The entire board was invited, so we'll see if they trickle in.
Fantastic. No
Okay.
worries. We're so excited to hear your story. We'll watch all of those videos. And then when we wrap that up, then we'll get into the discussion portion of the evening. So definitely looking forward to hearing from you in that time, but feel free to use the chat anytime throughout the evening if thoughts pop up and you have something you are dying to share. The chat is always there for you. We also have another first ever tonight, which is our sponsors. We have Stephanie Zeidenbos from Micro Mamas here tonight. Hi, Stephanie. Chloe Wingerter from Walden Mutual Bank is here tonight. Hi, Chloe. We're going to be hearing from them throughout the evening as well, briefly, and would also like to thank Sugar River Bank for sponsoring this evening so that we can tune in free of charge. I think that's really special. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we dive in. Again, use the chat throughout the night. Let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from, what you're eating, what you're drinking. We need to know.
Absolutely. It's
Right?
the most important part of
The
the
most
evening.
important part. So let us know. Feel free to change your name on your screen if you'd like to do that. If your video is on, we love that. Of course, if you need to turn your video on, no worries there. We do recommend you put it in speaker view for maximum viewing pleasure throughout the night. Katie's going to pop into the chat exactly how you do that if you aren't familiar with that. And again, Katie is here to support us with technical assistance. So if you have any needs throughout the night, feel free to send her a direct message in the chat. Did I miss anything housekeeping wise?
So I think you nailed
it
all the way through.
Felt like a lot of talking, as it always does, but just to set the stage for us so that we all know what to expect. I'm really excited now to pass it off to hear a word from our sponsor, from Stephanie Zeidenbos of Micro Mamas. So Stephanie, go ahead and take it away.
Hi there. I'm really happy to be here with everybody. Thank you, Kearsarge Food Hub, to our friends, families, acquaintances, farmers, and also to the here and now. I prepared a little something in writing so I didn't forget anything. So Micro Mama's slogan and mission is living, loving, local. We've worked alongside hundreds of food web contributors, organizations over the last 12 years, and we are really happy to be here sponsoring this event tonight. My guess is if that you are here tonight, you're in alignment with the mission of local food as a consumer, producer, advocate, educator, avatar, or perhaps maybe we've got a few new and curious to the local food system. Any of the combination above, we thank you for making the time go up. And more importantly, we thank you in advance for sharing the goodness of what you take away from tonight and share it with your friends, families, colleagues, passerbys, because it matters and it does make a difference. So I've been recently pondering that reality is that which has already happened. And if this is true, the only thing that is in front of us is this moment and what we do to be of service to it. For any local food web to exist, it requires a commitment beyond individual wallets. The approach is in all hands, minds, voices, and mouths of the many to not just survive, but to work towards thrive. So let's start small in service to the moment. When you're thinking about what to have for dinner tonight or tomorrow night or any night, try to set aside the spiraling problems of everything. A few moments where we stop protecting our fears and become enthusiastic about the single task at hand. This may take some effort, but really try. Think about a single ingredient or more if you're able that you can and will use that is locally grown or sourced. This is possible year round. There is a story of that single local ingredient, and chapter 1 is titled Love. The story has been passed on for generations. It's been revised, weeded, watered, full of history and some good shit. Landscape, drama, romance, science, mathematics, art, conflict, resolution, seasons, disaster, recovery, rebirth, life, death, poverty, abundance, and most definitely it has a rich plot, pun intended. That single ingredient makes all the difference. It is your demonstration and activism. It is your reciprocal engagement towards goodness. It is love. Service to the present moment can be this easy. For this meal, with just a single local ingredient, there is more goodness and hope than not. So we practice with the small stuff. We practice what we can handle. We practice devotion towards love and not fear. We practice the results. And if and when we can do more, we do that. So from the microscopic to the great cosmic, I say we evolve and not dissolve, and let's love local together. That's it.
Denise. Oh,
We're
thank
muted.
you.
There you go.
Thank you, Stephanie. Truly.
Thank you.
Such an inspiration for us here at the Food Hub. Stephanie runs Micro Mamas, which makes the best kimchi in the world. We obviously sell it at Sweet Beet Market, but we have also been working with Micro Mamas and Stephanie since we started. And so it's been really fun to watch her journeys co-evolve together. And yeah, we're just so grateful for all that you do for the food system.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you for your beautiful words. Actually, Stephanie
Thank
was one
you.
of our first Love Local features. If you recall, I bombarded you in your kimchi workshop. And we had a great time making that video. So you can find that on our YouTube channel if you want to revisit. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to I see a lot of familiar faces, so we don't need to go too far into the Kearsarge Food Hub story, but I do think it's important to set the stage of why we would be hosting an event like this and who we are and what the work is that we do. I'd like to start that by just saying the quote that inspired the theme of this event, right? As I mentioned, usually we focus on farmers and food makers, and of course those folks are so important, but Philip Ackerman Leist is an advocate and a farmer, and he's written so beautifully about what it takes to rebuild our food sheds. And he says, we are at this point now where we're really having to rebuild things. So we start from what's most immediate, what is local, and start to work on rebuilding that food system. Very often in rebuilding that food system, it's something that surprises us. It's actually the middle of the food system that we really have to start rebuilding. It's that infrastructure. It's what happens between farm gate and dinner plate. And I can't think of a sexier word than infrastructure. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The Kearsarge Food Hub started in 2015 as a seasonal roadside farm stand and a farm on 114 here in Bradford, New Hampshire. And we wanted to figure out how we could plug in between farm gate and dinner plate and really be a catalyst for moving more food. And the ideas that circulate around food and how powerful those are in our community here in central New Hampshire. And we've grown tremendously since then. I'm not going to take you step by step. Next year's our 10-year anniversary, so there will be plenty of time to reflect on all that we've done over the past 10 years. But what's most important really for tonight is everything that we've built is in service to our guiding mission. And that is to reinvigorate our community within a restorative local food system through cultivating food sovereignty, growing engaged learners, and nurturing community. I have found time and again, as someone responsible for some of our communications here at KFH, that it is almost impossible to do a 30-second elevator pitch of what it is we do here at KFH. But in essence, we function to build bridges between farmers, the agricultural system, and the wider community. And in this way, we have the very challenging job that we share with our featured organizations tonight of serving both farmers and neighbors who need access to local food. This looks like operating Sweet Beet Farm Market and Cafe. Of course, many folks might know us from visiting the Market and Cafe. Through those entities, we grow food, we source from over 150 local and regional food vendors. We prepare food in the cafe, and we create that community space where people can come and connect with those things. Lesser known programs include education, farmer training, food security, food donations, and community building work. And really generally just helping to reclaim the knowledge collectively of where our food comes from, how to grow food, and relearning how to rely on each other in community. So that's a really encouraging notion, that we can learn how to rely on each other in community. And it is not a new idea. We have been jumping into a movement that takes all sorts of shapes and sizes, this movement back to the land, this movement back to learning how to feed each other and care for each other on the local level. And of course, as a nonprofit organization, as all of our featured organizations are tonight, we rely on the hands of many to carry out our services, whether folks donate money or time or expertise. This is a collective community effort. I just want to hone in real quick on that one pillar of food sovereignty that I think is going to be illuminated tonight, and what food sovereignty means. It's more than food security, right? It's more than knowing the food that you need is going to be there when you need it. It's about bringing everyone into the conversation and empowering our community to decide for itself how the food system operates, who it prioritizes. And in so many ways, that is the core of this work. And it is a radical alternative to the global industrial system that prioritizes profit at the cost of many. And so, Franz, if you can share with us a little bit about why this radical change is needed.
Yeah, why is radical change needed? What's really at stake? Before I dive in, I just want to mention that tonight you're going to hear about the many challenges and threats against the viability of the local and regional food system. You might even think to yourself, how can we make it work? Is it even possible to be viable given all of these challenges that we face? And so, as we discuss these issues, I'd ask that we all keep in mind that while there is an illusion of the viability of the existing and current industrial scale globalized food system, it is far, far, far from viable. Monocropping, heavy machinery, chemical fertilizers, pesticide and insecticide use. Oh, sorry, something's happening.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're good. All of these things are polluting our lands and our waters, and of course are having devastating effects on human health. We have lost 50% of the Earth's topsoil in the last 150 years because of the industrial food system. What's more, billions of dollars of American taxpayer money is going to subsidize a few crops and the entire system. Corn and soy, for example, make up just about half of what we grow here in the United States. Because we subsidize these crops, their prices are artificially decreased, and products made from these crops flood the market. This includes then sweeteners in the form of high fructose corn syrup and hydrogenated fats made from soybeans. And of course, these processed foods that are made from these crops are convenient and affordable and ultimately very cheap. And so ultimately, that means that they are highly consumed across the United States. These processed foods are known to increase the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia, and all sorts of other health issues. What's more, we also know that supply chain disruptions happen all the time from things like a pandemic, climate disasters, workers' strikes, and these things all actively threaten our ability to potentially access foods from this system of global imports. The current system is leaving 37% of children and 29% of adults here in New Hampshire with insufficient food. Small farms are disappearing at alarming rates. There are severe labor shortages all throughout the food system because, of course, the jobs are extremely difficult and low paying. And in fact, undocumented workers make up 40% of our agricultural workforce. Climate events are worsening and making farming even more difficult, and some say that we have about 60 harvests left at the current rate of land degradation. None of this is viable. None of this is working. So, is our local food system viable? I think so. Does it need support to be viable? It really, really does. Because whether we want to or not, all of this directly impacts all of us. Farming, fishing, food distribution, all of this are extremely challenging industries. They take long hours of really hard work. It produces products that have a really short shelf life, and generally the margins are quite small. And yet we all need to eat 3 times a day in an affordable manner. And so, what do? We need community supported agriculture. And I'm not just talking about CSA boxes. And to dig into this, I'm actually going to pass it over to Seth Wilner, a field specialist focusing on agricultural business at UNH Cooperative Extension. Seth has over 20 years of experience working in the food system here in New England, and he's going to paint a picture of what community-supported agriculture can look like. Take it away, Seth.
Thank you. I remember the very beginning of Sweet Beet on 114, I used to sell tomatoes and garlic to them. And I went there one day just randomly, and they were like, those are nice tomatoes. And they were on the fence, but I had t-shirts from my farm, and that sold them. Pierre was like, yes. So I watched them grow. And if I had to give descriptors of what I would say for Sweet Beet, and what words describe them over time in my mind, this is what I came up with. Innovation coupled with a passion for food and social justice, experimentation, and a strong focus on business. And they had a heck of I loved, like, Lauren was almost militant in her business focus with France and with also like the board and Pam Brusson folks. And so that was so wonderful to watch. I don't know that I am going to teach you more than we'll learn together. And I think, given that description, I think both the previous folks speaking, Micro Mamas, I've long been a fan, and then what Hannah and Franz were saying, I've watched the evolution, and it's with concern of family farms, and more I looked at the economics of it. And this is going to share some of the picture and where we can all come in and support that. So community supported agriculture. Think about that word, or that phrase rather. We've heard that described a bunch. And then take about 30 seconds and think about, what does community supported agriculture actually look like to you? What are the words? What do they resonate for a picture? And put those thoughts in the chat if you would, please. I won't be able to see the chat, but folks can tell me or speak to that.
I love it. We're seeing.
While folks are populating the chat, I've been around long enough to see that community supported agriculture was almost born out of the failure of farmers markets. That, as farmers markets were one of the key market channels for direct local foods, and they started becoming not profitable. And I remember the study out of Cornell that blew everyone's minds, even like the big Ithaca market, Madison, Wisconsin's market. So that was a challenge. And so another market channel became community supported agriculture. In theory, it started out as a risk management tool where we would all buy in shares, and the volume of produce we got was really based on the success of the farm that season. Presumably, if it was a tough season, we'd have less. And if it was a robust season, we'd have more. And then it kind of evolved more into buy a box a share and we will give you produce. Then the box CSA, community supported agriculture, then evolved into these gift cards, credit cards, and you could go and get what you want, things to that effect. But we're not using that word in this sense. Instead, we're really looking at what does it take to support farms. Franz, Hannah, can you read any of some of the key?
There's a lot of great things coming in, including knowing where your food is grown and made and how it is grown and made, neighborhood gardens where members work and harvest from, showing our children where food comes from, farmers making a living wage while providing high quality, sustainable food for everyone in the community.
Food grown in thoughtful soil. I love it. Food is a basic human right in community.
Yeah. No. These are a lot of philosophical responses as to the beliefs that fuel a community that supports agriculture.
Yeah. Knowing your farmer, visibility, solidarity, agriculture in which the local community is actively contributing. Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
Really great.
Here's some of the things that I came up with just to add to the conversation. So definitely supporting farms economically. And so certainly the direct purchasing of products and services, and then also donations of just money for operating and expenses, and things to that effect. And that was one of the innovations when the Kearsarge Food Hub, when they were able to tap into the community. I thought that was brilliant. I also felt it was brilliant for their operations and their bottom line, but it feels good actually to donate to causes that you really care about. So it gave an opportunity for many folks to be able to participate, showing up for fundraising events, farm to table. I know Riverview Farm does meals in the orchard, things to that effect. And then also, since land and infrastructure that we were speaking about, quite expensive and also hard to get, making farm-friendly leases for those becomes something that we can economically support farms by. So community-supported agriculture in those ways. Then, of course, there's all these policies. Right in Henniker was where agritourism really kind of became born from looking at that as another enterprise, another opportunity, and all the fights that happened leading to the laws there. But setbacks, signage, parking, what is allowable in various zoning, we have the ability to shape that. Absolutely, we can shape that and support agriculture and other ordinances. And many communities have agricultural commissions, so we actually can serve on volunteer boards that are usually associated with land use or planning boards. And then we're also seeing the need to really work fairly loudly to get three-phase electricity, to get cell service, dependable internet in places, and of course roads and services. And then, as many of you mentioned, really making the identity of the community part of the culture. Any other comments or things in the chat to read before we go on to kind of the next?
There's a lot here about bringing in like younger generations, right? Not just thinking about our immediate needs in the community at this time, but looking further down the road and equipping future generations with this knowledge and this care.
Nice. There's a bunch of facts and figures here. I started really getting curious as to what we teach to help beginning farmers. And we teach this model that says we're going to give you all these skills, and you too can go and start up a farm and earn your livelihood from it and be successful and do it mostly in a go it alone. You know, you grow it, you market it, process it, sell it. And so then the more I read about farm failure rates, 85% failure rate in the first 4 years of farming, I was like, whoa. Then I look at debt. And then I started really looking at benchmark studies where we worked with farms in their books and we saw their numbers. And so for a presentation, I don't know, a month ago, I just started digging into the US Ag Census. Every 5 years, they do these census, and you can see that the total number of farms relatively stable. But the key thing that I was really moved by was a number of farms that gross. These are gross revenues, not net. That gross these dollar amounts. It can better be seen in these pie charts. It's fairly consistent, but you could see that 83% to 84% of farms actually gross less than $25,000 a year. I'm like, wow. And if you look and add in this 10% little slice of the pie, then you get up to 93, 94% gross less than 100,000 a year. So that was like, holy mackerel. And I knew from what I did for my research and looking at Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Ag, PASA, their benchmark studies, and looking at Farm Credit East benchmark studies, that profit margins, this is actually generous. They really aren't 15 to 30%. There's really 3 to 7% in New Hampshire for direct produce. It was less than 1% for dairy. Maple syrup is profitable, and we have some big operations. So if we just did easy math and we said, okay, let's look at 10% profit margins on a farm that is grossing 100,000, that's $10,000 a year. So how would you support your family? And when we say profit, that profit does not include debt service. It includes interest, but not principal. So that money is not even the money that goes into your pocket. And so that started really having me think about, should we start challenging how we are supporting farms and how we are encouraging farms to form? And I'm going to skip this slide, but one of the things that is, we're always encouraging farmers to get bigger or diversify or add value, which I do believe adding value is something that is key, and hence that infrastructure. But oftentimes that requires such a significant capital investment. And then we certainly have seen what climate change has done over the last decade, 15 years. I mean, it's just quite something. I don't think we can go a 5-year span where it's not been dramatic at its negative impact. So we look at what are new models that might help us have a resilient food system. Annalena Bruce at UNH has been looking at that and her research. And there's been a lot out there in discussion. There is, and I'm going to put this in the chat. I don't know if I just switched sharing, but I'm going to copy. You can do it. Copy and close that out. And then I'll put this in the chat. Here's an interesting article. Paste. Boom. Don't save. Back to the slideshow, hopefully. Joel Salatin became more and more and more popular, famous. The model of you can do it. If you implement sustainable practices and you are local and you fill a niche, you too can make it. And he would cite that in his book. And you can net, not even gross, 25 to 30K a year for just on 20 acres, 50-hour work weeks and whatnot. And that was not what I was seeing in the field. And then he started getting challenged. And Chris Newman really was challenging that idea. Can you really do that? And so they went out, and Chris Newman and his wife Annie left professional jobs engineering, and they went into the profession of farming. And yet they found that it really was not viable in that model. And so they started looking at different models. And their model was really more of the aggregate model where farms come together, they share the expenses of marketing, they share the expenses of processing, they share the risks. And so I started looking at, it made me really rethink these models. You can go and read that article, and it's really very interesting reading. And so what are other models that we could look at? And that challenging the traditional sole source models, starting on your own and going on your own, the collaborative sales models, the co-branding, the co-processing. I love it at Oris where they share land. They actually are dividing high tunnel space. They're sharing risk, so on and so forth, sharing the equipment infrastructure. But there's so many barriers to doing this. Sharing labor has a huge barrier, legal risks, financial risks, things to that effect. So that is what I am assessing now, and I know that many are. And so I think that that was what I was invited to come and speak about with you all. And I don't know, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just engage in conversation if that's part of that program, or if we move on to the next topic. But if you have any quick questions, or actually what I want to do is not derail the program and pass it back to Franz and Hannah and see where they want to go from here.
Well, we do have about 5 minutes in our schedule. We're sticklers for schedules, you guys. So we're going to be keeping us on point. But
If there are any questions.
if there are any questions, anybody wants to chime in on really illuminating information, Seth, you've painted the picture beautifully of really how challenging and nearly impossible it is to tell somebody to go start farming and have that be successful in the current landscape. Does anybody want to chime in with their voice, with their video about anything Seth just said? You can go ahead and raise your hand if you do.
Steve raised his hand.
Allenby, you raised it.
Steve Allenby.
Oh.
Yeah, I finally figured out how to do that. I just had a question. If we're looking at local food, is there an opportunity to encourage private gardeners to go bigger and to get the produce from them? It may be a really off the wall sort of suggestion, because it sounds like local farms can only go so far. And if we're looking for a local food system, do we also need the food that private people would want to grow, or would want to grow in a smaller way than a whole farm?
It's a great question. There are some opportunities and some barriers. So in terms of the opportunities, the Natural Resource Conservation Service has expanded their EQIP program to provide infrastructure, irrigation systems, high tunnels, biochar, compost, things to that effect, to gardeners and homesteaders. And so that is something that you can sign up for now, and it's a first-time opportunity. A lot of that money has been tied to the Inflation Reduction Act, which for all appearances is
going to go away.
Yeah, it looks like it is going to go away.
Yeah.
So definitely sign up right now if you can. And you could call the Natural Resource Conservation Service. For those that are in, I deal with the Cheshire Walpole office, the Cheshire Sullivan County office in Walpole. Many of you would be in the Merrimack County, but that is something that absolutely is possible. A constraint to that would be you would have to have insurance if you really wanted to protect your risk. Because if I go because the trend of consumers are, if one gets sick and they sue fairly ubiquitously, and then you defend yourself. But insurance, my small farm package was $1,200 and then insured infrastructure and all kinds of things. So there may be abilities to mitigate risk more cheaply than that. But that would be one constraint and one opportunity I would see. So.
You know, you mentioned insurance, and Erica mentioned housing here in terms of the things that go into community supported and viable agriculture. Of course, there's no end to all the threads that need to be kind of aligned to make something like this viable. Steve Allenby is the president of KNP, co-founder of KNP, Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners, working on developing affordable housing here in the Kearsarge region. So thank you for your work, Steve and KNP.
Yeah. We have an interesting question, and I think Seth, if you can answer it relatively simply, but how would you summarize federal government and also New Hampshire state government policy towards small scale local farmers? But put another way, how are our tax dollars directed towards this issue?
Great question. Thank you, Peter. Always asking the hard questions.
We take a lot of federal monies that come down the pike and go from USDA through the Department of Agriculture, and we try to use those to support local farm services, like we did with the Farmer Rancho mental health monies, Farm Strong New Hampshire, like we're doing with these crop loss monies, and like we're doing with the Resilient Food System Infrastructure monies. And we're trying to address needs of small and local farms, because as you can see, 93% of our farms are certainly that, and I'd actually say 97%. So on a state basis, I see that local intention and desire. And then, but there is the argument of scale. What is a scale that we should support? Is it 100,000 gross, 30,000 gross? You don't even look at a gross. So that is being challenged in the conversation to discuss. On the federal level, I see it going up and down. So it somewhat depends. They always had like the small farm conference that I attended even like my first 5 years. And I thought that it was a lot of lip service towards small farms, but I don't know enough to give you facts on what percent of the budget I did at the time goes towards small farms versus a different agricultural model.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Seth.
And just one quick note from our work is one of the challenges of federal and even state money is barriers to entry for grant application process, administrative costs, who knows what grants come where. There's a lot of jargon, and it can be a very prohibitive process for people to actually access the money. And I've been hearing a lot from food system partners, there's all this money over here, there's all this money over there. And it's can be really challenging to understand where it's coming from, how to get it, and then also the reporting requirements once you get money like that.
Is it even worth it? No.
Do you have to tailor your programming specifically to get this specific grant that's then going to run out in 2 or 3 years? Administrations change. So one of the things that we found here at the Kearsarge Food Hub, and I'm very curious to hear a little later on from our featured organizations, there's actually a lot of power in being a nonprofit that relies on fundraising from your community. What we get to do, France and I, managing the fundraising at the Food Hub, is it, of course, is a lot of work, but it's worthwhile work to ask you each and every year and several times to invest in the work that we're doing here at the Kearsarge Food Hub. Definitely going to be curious to hear from our featured organizations a little bit more how that works, but there's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of freedom to engage a community directly and not rely on, changing administrations and government funds.
Well, it holds us truly accountable to the needs of this community, and that will inevitably change. And as a nonprofit organization, our goal is to change with those needs.
Yeah, I'm also really excited. I just want to shine a light on Andrea and the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. We use a lot of language around farming and agriculture, and we're really excited to have your presence here tonight to bring fisheries and seafood into the conversation as equally important parts of everything we're talking about.
That's right.
But before we move on,
to the exciting parts of the videos, we are going to hear from one of tonight's sponsors. Chloe Wingerter is here from Walden Mutual Bank. Walden Mutual Bank is relatively new on the scene in the region here in New England, and they're here to serve the financial needs of the community, but also the local food system. They were actually our first ever Sweeby Market sponsor, and we are so delighted for that partnership, and they're sponsoring us here tonight. And now I'll pass it off to Chloe. Hear from you.
Thank you, France and Hannah. Hi, everyone. It is great to meet you all and be part of this incredible event. As France and Hannah mentioned, I'm from the Walden Mutual Bank team. We're a new kid on the block, about to be 2 years this February. We're a new FDIC insured mutual bank with the mission to enable anyone to make positive and lasting change in our local food ecosystem. How we do that is using deposit dollars from, thank you, Tara. I'm looking at the chat. Deposit dollars from individuals, businesses, nonprofits to lend to businesses, farms, growers, nonprofits in our food ecosystem here in New England and New York, across the whole food ecosystem. So farmers and growers, but also that middle infrastructure space, which we're talking about today, all the way to retailers and kind of the consumer brand space. But at the bank, we really do believe that the systemic shifts that we all want to see really start locally with individual relationships and with communities. So that's why we were thrilled to sponsor this event. And just to highlight, I think stories are really helpful. Since this is focused on the middle infrastructure space, some of the really awesome businesses that we get to work with in the region include Myers Produce, which is an incredibly female-owned distributor based out of Vermont and Western Massachusetts. Annie Myers is a powerhouse in this space. We get to work with Ace Naturals, their distributor based out of New York City. They're kind of leading the distribution of the natural organic food space. Three Rivers Farm Alliance, they're more local in New Hampshire. So they're a farmer owner aggregate food hub based on the seacoast, bringing local food to homes and restaurants and institutions in New Hampshire. So those are some really awesome distributors that we get to work with that, as Hannah mentioned at the beginning, kind of working in this invisible space behind the scenes. But also one personal area that I am really excited about is the regional grain economy. So we've been working with some awesome mills like Farmer Ground Flour and Brooklyn Granary, as well as a malt house up in Maine. So there's a really awesome amount of stuff that's working kind of behind the scenes in this middle space. And it's really excited to kind of see those businesses and those owners and entrepreneurs come to life. So, but it all starts with the local community. So I'm really thankful to Hannah and France and the whole Kearsarge Food Hub team for putting this event together and supporting the local scene.
Of course, it's a mouthful, our name. For some reason, it's what we named ourselves. Thank you so much, Chloe. Just real quick before we dive in, it's so important to shine a light on the unseen forces and the financial aspects of funding and really bringing to life projects with that financial energy couldn't be more important. Seth obviously mentioned Lauren, one of our teammates, and her kind of business mindset early on. She is definitely one of the driving forces of developing our financial systems at the Kearsarge Food Hub. And many, many others. So thank you, folks who focus on the money piece. It's so important.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
It's hard. It's really
It's
hard.
I'm grateful that I just have to do the social media, etc. But that's a whole different space. Just. Anyway, let's get to the main features of tonight. So if you shop at Sweet Beet, raise your hand if you shop at Sweet Beet. Hello, hello, hello. Believe it or not, Food Connects if you shop at Sweet Beet. We've been sourcing from them for years to bring in a wide range of products that we would not otherwise be able to bring to our rural market in Bradford, New Hampshire, thanks to Food Connects and their work sourcing from farmers all along the Connecticut River Valley and bringing them to places like Sweet Beet and beyond. Their story shows us that, as we've been discussing tonight, it is incredibly important to grow food and produce food locally, but there is a lot of work to do in building out the channels that effectively move that food through the community. There's a really important role for nonprofits to play to this end, and Food Connects is just an incredible example. So let's just have them tell their own story. I'm going to go ahead and do the scariest part of the evening, which is hopefully share my screen in a way that that works for everybody and sounds and looks good. My screen share is paused. Hoop, hoop, hoop. Bear with me, my friends. Here we go.
My name is Richard Brookfield, and here we are at the Food Connects International Headquarters in Brattleboro, Vermont. I am the founder and executive director.
My name is McKenna. I am the director of the Food Hub program, which is one of the programs under the umbrella of Food Connects, a nonprofit. Our vision is healthy families, thriving farms, and connected communities. And when I think about the distribution work of the Food Hub, those trucks are moving food through the community from the farm to the families and just really connecting all of that, hence the name Food Connects, right?
So the founding story of the Food Hub is a group of students were wondering why the elementary school was not buying apples from the orchard a mile up the road.
Like the first delivery was a case of apples in the back of a Subaru, classic, right? They couldn't do it through the distribution networks that the school could purchase through. And so someone just was like, fine, we'll do it ourselves. I mean, of course, many things happened in many different ways to get us where we are today, but that really was the first delivery of the Food Hub.
You know, now we've got half a dozen trucks and 17,000 square foot warehouse.
So 6 years ago, we did $400,000 worth of sales. This year, we're budgeting about $4 million worth of sales. When the food system was incentivized to go big, we lost a lot of those middle actors. And it's not just distribution, it's all across the board. Like the middle of the food system is kind of missing, and we're slowly trying to rebuild that. I don't necessarily know that every hyper-local community having its own food hub is also the answer. Like I think the regional relationships are really, really important. We want hyper-local and we want regional systems.
We heard from a lot of local food producers that they wanted access to new markets and that we needed trucking to be able to do that. We needed some cold storage. We needed staff people for sales. At the same time, we heard from schools and hospitals and retail stores that they wanted to access more local and regionally grown food, but it wasn't necessarily easily available through existing distribution routes. So it feels like we're really filling in a lot of gaps within central rural New England.
And it's tough though. It's tough work. Distribution's hard work.
It really is a challenge. We put ourselves in the middle of a farmer who wants to get as much as they can for their products and a customer who wants to pay as little as possible for their products. We feel the push and pull on both sides.
And I wish more people knew how hard some of this stuff was. Not only are you driving the trucks, not only are you carrying lots of heavy stuff and using equipment, you also are the point of contact with the customer. So like you're also giving customer service to every person you interact with. Like trucks break, right? Like reefer units break on trucks. It's hard with the weather, like snowstorms, mud season, much more weather events related to climate change happening. The nonprofit model definitely does help us succeed. It allows us to offer services that we might not be able to offer if this was purely on a for-profit basis.
For us, the importance is supporting producers and getting products into new markets. That requires us to spend a lot of time building relationships with producers on one hand and supporting them and getting ready to sell into wholesale markets, and also ensuring that there are lucrative markets for them.
It allows us to spend more time providing technical assistance to a vendor wanting to enter the wholesale market. It allows us to maybe go to a customer that's not necessarily profitable on the route, but like we want to get to that customer. It allows us to do things differently, more creatively. More money stays in the community, more money goes back to the grower. Our deciding factor is not how much of a profit are we making on this transaction or relationship. It's like how many people are we helping? How are we starting to strengthen the system?
And food is a very low profit business to begin with. And so the support that we can get goes directly to support the farmers and the producers and at the end of the day, the end users and customers. What really drives me to do this work is I see these positive interventions within the food system as benefiting many of the issues and concerns that I have about our communities and our planet. You know, the more we can eat regional food, the better it is for our rural economies, dramatically decreasing our carbon emissions, social benefits of eating fresher and better food, also a lot of value for our education system when kids are eating better foods in schools, and all around just seeing this as the right thing to do for our communities.
What we do, the decisions we make every day, where we buy our food from, it really matters. I hear that a lot, that it's like, what am I to do? I'm just one person. But like, if you multiply that across thousands of people, like what power we have to make change in the system Richard actually always says this, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And it's like, cool, like you can't buy everything local, but buy what you can. Yeah, you got to go get this from the big store, but you can get that from the small store. Like, that's great.
If everybody in New England spent $10 more a week on local food, that's a big number, and that will actually have a big impact on our regional food system.
Yeah, love local means so many things. To me, it kind of is more of a remembering. We are integrating old systems with new technology, new ways of thinking. But like, we're also just remembering the way people used to do things before. And it's like, we can mix these two things together. Love local is remembering. That's right.
Hopefully you all could see that and hear that. That's the nerve-wracking part about these virtual events. Well, we just couldn't be more grateful for the work of Food Connects. Richard Burkfield, who is here, you can ask him all your questions in a little bit, was one of the first people we reached out to when we were trying to build a food hub ourselves. And we remember going down, right?
We sure
And
do.
sitting with him and picking his brain. And their model is just such an inspiration to us here at KFH. And something that he said really struck us. Don't know if anybody remembers a few years back, we did a Love Local pledge at Sweet Beet. We were encouraging folks to spend $10 on local food. Of course, Richard just encouraged us to direct $10 more a week on local food. So in New England, we did some quick math. We have, according to a 2018 census, about 12 million adults in New England. And so if 12 million adults spent $10 or more a week on local food, that would generate $6.2 billion annually in our local and regional food system.
That's not nothing.
That's not nothing.
No, that's not nothing.
It's kind of a big deal. And of course, my favorite part, more or less, is just the sentiment that you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to buy all your food locally. You don't have to, go to that extreme, but small increments of integrating this into our lives does really adds up to make a big difference.
Yeah.
And if you feel compelled at this time, what we're curious about is what prevents you from spending more money on local food, from shopping locally more? What barriers in your life make it hard for you to access local food? I think many of us on the call working in food systems are always eager to hear what prevents folks from shopping locally and how we can address those barriers.
Yeah, we know cost is often one of them, time, transportation, access. There's so many different things, but we would love to hear from everyone what your barriers, if you feel comfortable sharing.
Definitely save your questions for Richard. We're so excited to have him here. And then, of course, we have Michael, who delivers food to Sweet Beet. We have Donnie, who manages some of the marketing at Food Connects, all on the call. So we're feeling so grateful to have your team here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Yeah. I also just want to echo thanks. It's like Hannah said, such an inspiration to all of us here at the Kearsarge Food Hub, and watching you all grow, especially in the last few years after the pandemic, and really focus your operations and increase your impact tremendously. It's very cool.
Yeah, just before we move on, one thing that I did have to cut out of the video, but I thought was really cool is earlier on, they were trying to do so many other diverse things in the food system. I believe it was operating a farm or having an educational component, and they had to decide at some point where to focus their energies, and decided to kind of double down on this aggregation and distribution food hub model, which we of course benefit from as a community-based educational food hub that doesn't quite dabble in that kind of aggregation and distribution.
Really happy to not do that part of it. Actually, we considered it for a while, and we're very grateful to not also be in that business. So.
Yeah. Major takeaway is that work is incredibly hard, and so at least we all leave with a greater appreciation for how difficult it is to aggregate and distribute food.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so on to our next video. Tonight is all about showing what bridges in our local food system can look like. Fresh Start Farm beautifully demonstrates this active bridge building with a specific focus on supporting refugee, immigrant, and new American farmers. Here in New Hampshire, immigrants make up 6.2% of the population. So we'll see how Fresh Start Farms is working to put infrastructure into place that support these new Americans in their journey making a life here, and specifically helping these individuals connect with our greater community and giving back and helping to feed people with local food.
I'm Sarah Bauer. I am the director of Fresh Start Farms. Fresh Start Farms, which is a program of the Organization for Refugee and Immigrant Success, ORIS, is a nonprofit. It is a collective brand for refugee and immigrant farmers who grow a wide variety of crops, including culturally specific crops to their home countries. We are here on the Dunbarton Farm. It's a 56-acre farm that about 10 new American farmers farm on. Fresh Start started about almost 20 years ago now by a group of Somali Bantu refugees who wanted to continue to support refugees when they arrive in this country, but also the farming aspect of it was to try to support and honor the skills and experiences that the farmers had at home and be able to adapt that to New England markets.
My name is Sylvain Bukasa. I am a farmer here in Dunbarton for 15 years. Our first focus was our neighbor. We want to produce for our neighbors and then for the market, like farmers market. Sometimes we go directly to families.
There's roughly 40 farmers. We have about 25 farmers who are selling to market. Some farmers are just farming for themselves and farming for their friends and family. And then some farmers are making a business out of it and want to grow. The biggest piece that Fresh Start Farms provides is access to land. So that's the hardest piece for folks. So we own this Dunbarton land here. And then the other properties that we have are in Concord and Boscawen, and they're leased properties that basically divide out even amounts of land to farmers based on what their goals are for their farm. So we have wash stations at each of the farm, there's walk-in coolers, and then there's staff members that support in training programs, support with pest management and, you know, growing and planting plans and all of those pieces of farming, and then also to adapting to the markets and trying to figure out how they want to grow their business. And a huge piece is the access to the Fresh Start Food Hub. In a lot of ways, it's been a very sustainable and guaranteed market for them, which is really exciting. When they sell to the food hub, they don't need to find that on their own and deal with customer service and marketing and sales and all those pieces. We take that piece for them so that they can focus on their farming. I got into this work because of a love of food and a love of land. We have to get everyone involved in the conversation. You know, we have a big focus on trying to make sure we're supporting the farmers and selling their food. But a big piece of it is like, how is everybody getting access to this local food and this fresh food? How are we making it affordable? We sell the food that we buy from the farmers, the Fresh Start farmers, as well as other local producers through a CSA farm share, through wholesale, and then also through multiple food access initiatives. We have a mobile market that goes to affordable housing complexes around Manchester and Concord and other community sites. We have a brick and mortar store at our food hub that is in a neighborhood that needs more access to fresh food.
My mission is to feed people with fresh food that is local and that you can eat the same day. They like these ones. When I deliver them, people eat them the same day, which is great. It sometimes helps people who are in situation where they cannot afford, because our produce are pretty cheap. We trying to make sure that people have, you know, food available for them, especially fresh vegetables. That's our main mission.
The reality of food work is, you know, especially for middle of the food system, you know, food hubs is, you know, we're trying really hard to make sure that the farmers are getting a wage that's fair. They're getting a price that's fair for their food, for all the effort that it takes, but still keeping that price accessible for folks is a battle, and that's a challenge. Something that's definitely, you know, we found in a lot of ways really key for us is to be a nonprofit. You're not always going to be able to make it all work and make sure your workers are being paid fairly and the farmers are being paid fairly and you have the equipment that you need without like the grants that support our work. I mean, to the Fresh Start farmers, it's huge, and to be able to come back to your roots and also to be able to grow that food for the community that they are part of. You know, one program, Haisha, one really exciting program is the New Hampshire Food Bank has been, through the New Hampshire Feeding New Hampshire program, making a large effort to make sure there are culturally specific crops available in food pantries. There's been a lot of folks who have been just kind of disenfranchised by food pantries because they're not seeing the crops and food that they're used to and want. They've contracted with us to make large wholesale purchases of crops that are specific to countries that the farmers are from. Pumpkin leaves and sorrel and sausawa, and there's been a great response to that. For people to be able to find markets or food pantries that are selling food that they are familiar with and excited to eat, and seeing that really helps with their, you know, belonging and feeling like they're part of this community and welcome here.
What's the name of this in your language? Norigi. Norigi. It's African eggplant or garden egg. That's a sweet one. I must have got one that wasn't sweet.
So here at KFH, we also understand, you know, the barriers to entry into agriculture for new farmers. You know, we do our part to address some of them with our career readiness programs for high school students, culminates in apprenticeships, and we also try to increase access to markets. Of course, the challenges facing refugees and immigrants getting into farming include all of the same things, including, you know, real challenges to access to land and technical support. Plus, of course, just the added challenge of trying to do this in a different country, in a different place, as you're trying to build community and belonging. And so we're really grateful to the work of Fresh Start Farms, also an organization we've had the pleasure of co-evolving with for all these years, for the critical support they're providing to new Americans who are an incredibly important part of our local food system.
And generally, as you mentioned before, obviously a topic we're all talking about from the election is, you know, immigration here to the United States. And it is important to remember that non-US born folks make up the majority of the people growing, harvesting, distributing our food. So keeping that in mind is, there's obviously, it's a very nuanced topic, very complicated topic, but that is the reality of it. We have Tom McGee here who manages the technical assistance to our Fresh Start, to the Fresh Start farmers. So you can please save your questions for him, and we'll circle back when we're at the discussion period after the next and final video that we will show tonight. We have, of course, talked so much about the importance of farms and the decline of farms here in New Hampshire, across the United States. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack noted that we lost well over 500,000 farms since the 1980s. And of course, that is a very concerning number for all of us who care about the food system and also who rely on the food system. But the trend is not exclusive to farming and farms. The trend of what's happening and the decline of stakeholders is the same in our fisheries. And so I am so excited to have Andrea Tomlinson here, to have the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance represented here tonight. This organization, as you're going to see in this video, Andrea is going to describe it so much better than I, are working to represent this critical group of voices in an often underrepresented sector of our local food system. So let's hear more about their work.
I'm Andrea Tomlinson. I am the Executive Director and founder of the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. We are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization incorporated in the state of New Hampshire in February of 2022. We want to become the go-to Northern New England unified umbrella for young fishermen and women 45 and under who are looking for ways to succeed in their future to become successful small boat owner operators in the commercial fishing industry. There's a lot of correlations between the struggles that young farmers have today and young fishermen and women. Fishing requires a lot of manual labor. It's hard hours. It's an undeterminate amount of time that you're going to work, and it's an undeterminate amount of money that you're going to make. We've really seen a huge decline in workforce. In New Hampshire alone, when I first started working with commercial fishermen, we had at least 90 on our short little 15-mile coastline shorelines. We had at least 90 fishermen fishing for fish. And now we have 4. I'm really focused on small and medium-sized boat stakeholders, and those are the ones we've seen decline dramatically. The catch share system was implemented about 14 years ago, and it radically changed how young fishermen and women could get into the industry. Basically privatized, unfortunately, put a set quota on each species of fish. Permits started to get consolidated, and large corporate conglomerate organizations were able to purchase those permits. It was a pay-to-play type of situation. So it's a lack of access because of the capital requirement a young person needs to get into a boat with a permit. We're looking at like $450,000 minimum for a young person to buy a boat, buy a permit that has any type of viability in being able to make an annual living from. You've got the cost of your equipment, you've got your mooring costs, you've got your employment costs. So access is really limited due to the amount of capital that is required. The industry is incredibly regulated and highly supervised, so that is a real turnoff for a lot of Gen Z and young millennials. We do need regulation, and we do very much need our commercial fisheries to be watched over and regulated. But what we would really like to see is better science. We would like to see more industry-based data incorporated into the stock assessments and the regulations, management, and policy of the commercial fishing industry to make it a little bit more of a fair playing field. So one of the primary reasons that we started New England Young Fishermen's Alliance was to bring light to that fact and do something about it. Our biggest program right now is our Deckhand to Captain training program. We're in our 3rd year. We train seasoned deckhands or sternmen how to become a successful owner-operator of their own business. That involves business management, marketing development, understanding rules and regulations, public speaking training, collaborative research opportunities, and how to advocate for your industry. Just to synopsize that 20-week-long, 9-month course. We do 6 trainees a year. We're hoping to get 9 next year. We have funding to take 9 people.
I found this class at a Coast Guard safety training. I met Andrea, and she told me I'd be a good fit.
I went to a fisherman's farm in Rockport, and she had a New England Young Fishermen's Alliance stand there. And here I am a month later, sitting on this desk and starting this journey. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of positives.
This is an integral part of our food security as well.
85% of seafood in the United States is imported from other countries that don't have to play by the regulations that we do.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that if you buy local, you're also backing the regulations that provide sustainability.
The hard cold facts are this: of that 85% of the seafood that we're consuming imported, 1 to 3% of that is inspected as it comes into our country. Something called IUU, illegal, uninspected, and unregulated seafood. That is coming in to the United States by the hundreds of thousands of pounds daily. So you don't know where that fish is coming from. You may think you know where it's coming from the label, but oftentimes it's mislabeled. And then you don't know anything about the practices that are being implemented on that vessel or the practices that are being implemented on that fish farm. Just be really aware of what your local seafood is and try your best to support local. When you're supporting a local fisherman or woman, you are not just supporting that person. You are supporting the entire working waterfront community.
All that seafood that is being harvested around here, it's part of that character, part of that heritage that gets transferred from generation to generation. It's a way to recognize, the local character of any place that you go to is pretty much related to the local jobs and industries that are involved. We're representing a part of it here.
It's like farming. I mean, farming and fishing are 2 agricultural pillars. Gotta keep them around for a while, or
we're not gonna have any food.
I myself am a huge proponent of local food. Eating local is supporting your local community. It's supporting your local food harvesters and food growers. If they feel supported, and if your economy is supported, and you're supporting your heritage and culture, what could be better? It's a safer bet. You're supporting your local harvester, you're supporting your local community by eating local. Are there any other questions? I mean, seriously, why would you not eat local?
Buy local.
Buy local seafood.
Buy fresh, buy local.
That's right.
Thank you, Andrea. You are a powerhouse. One thing I must mention is all of our incredible chats and my visits to the coast to see you. Just a slight misspeak in what IUU stands for. IUU stands for illegal, unreported, unregulated seafood, and yet all the statistics that Andrea shared are accurate and incredibly alarming.
Yeah, surprising, shocking.
Surprising, shocking. Importing 85% of the seafood we consume when we live in New England with the Atlantic Ocean here, having 70% of that mislabeled, having 1 to 3% of that actually inspected. It's really mind-blowing. It really makes you think.
Yeah, well, and I think not ultimately being accountable to the growing or the fishing practices, right? It's an easy thing to just say it's coming, here it is, and not knowing kind of if I don't see it, it's not happening. And so I think that's the power of choosing local and supporting and knowing what's happening. We get to take true accountability for our part in what's happening.
And something you mentioned that we don't often talk about, and folks be thinking about your questions. We're about to dig into the discussion portion, but how our fisheries, how our farms are a part of our heritage, our cultural heritage. And it's not just about the food security and the sustainability, and all of that is incredibly important. And of course, the taste and the quality, but how to preserve the heritage of a place that is all of those factors and more, all of the intangible things, what it means to source, grow, make, and eat locally. So very well put, Andrea. You are a titan in the local food system, and we're so grateful to have you here tonight. Folks, obviously the thread is, what does community supported agriculture and fisheries look like? And we have these experts here in the room with us. So we would love to open the floor to questions for specifically our featured organizations and experts in the room tonight.
Yeah, that's what we want to do.
Feel free to raise your hand. We'd love to see faces. We love to hear some voices.
No way.
Or we're just going to start calling on people. So be ready for that as well.
Oh, wow. We never get crickets. This is, oh, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Seth. Steve Horan, question for you. So in your research and local farms, what are the top 1, 2, 3 biggest cost factors that are holding these people down, if you will?
Labor is probably the number one cost, I'd say. So labor is likely the number one cost. Debt can often be a huge cost. And then what else? It depends on what commodity it might be. But infrastructure things, post-harvest processing, feed if you're in the livestock world is a huge cost, those type of things. And that's why I'm really looking at ways of solving labor through technology, through new models of sharing labor to the extent that the law allows, and then really looking at debt. It was interesting to be partnered with a lot of lenders who are wonderful people, but of course derive profit by lending, and to be working with farmers, and they were kind of pushed to scale up. You've done so well, you could do even better. And as A friend of mine said from Farm Credit East, I mean, capital is like fuel. It can propel you forward or burn you down. And so really having an awareness of that.
And the majority of debt, I assume, is equipment?
Land, equipment, buying the farm, things to that effect.
And are there government tax incentives on infrastructure, or is that only for the massive farmers of the Midwest? Because you hear about the massive farmers in the Midwest and they own these $1 million harvest machines and they're hardly paying a nickel for them.
There are definitely tax incentives, but again, being aware of when to use those. So you can do a 179 accelerated depreciation, but when to do that? Is that going to be in a year that's profitable? Is it going to be, do you want to actually spread out the ability to expense things? And then if your farm doesn't make it and the government wants to recapture depreciation, does that actually make your exit even harder? So those are some of the things that where the business education just becomes just so huge. And where knowing what to ask your lenders becomes really huge as well. We work with some farms that got loans that exceeded the return on the asset and the return on investment went down. And we're like, why did you accept that loan? And the farmer said to us, I had no idea what ROA and ROI was. And so knowing what to ask is also going to be huge.
So is there an opportunity for a cooperative around financial and tax management services for farmers?
Could very well be. When we see Small Business Development Center, or we see SCORE, wonderful operations, wonderful organizations, and yet sometimes they just simply don't know agriculture and agricultural laws or tax things. And so training those people would be great. Having folks that were well-versed and volunteering to help farmers, or even, as you said, cooperatives. But right now, private industry is struggling as much as public institutions to actually find skilled, tax planners and lenders and things to that effect. So,
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a question in the chat for Andrea. I'm curious, this is from Barb. I'm curious, what does it cost to train one fisherman or woman? You say you have funding for 9. What do you need to make it 10?
Thanks, Barb. Actually, I do want to promote everyone here on this call to really look into USDA funding for nonprofits. We were actually funded by USDA in the beginning through the Farmers Market Promotion Program through the Agricultural Market Service. So Barb, to answer your question, we did get some additional funding from the Builders Initiative to push our programming up into southern Maine. So it cost, if you include the stipend that the fishermen and women get, we give them a $5,000 stipend for including the, finishing the training, and their mentor gets a $2,000 stipend. We're looking at between, $10,000 and $15,000 per fisherman or woman to train them. So 9 is really our max right now. We've got kind of a limited space that where we're training, and we found that 9 is going to be our max for now. And what we're also looking at is we need trained help on the back of the boat. So we're looking at just starting an apprenticeship program with some funding that we've recently gotten.
And so, Andrea, just to clarify, your deckhand and captain training, that's for seasoned deckhand and captains who are well-versed in the actual fishing, and they come to you for the business and, permits and all of the additional things that go into being an owner operator of your business.
So most fishing vessels in northern New England, folks, are 50 feet or smaller, and the way that's set up is the captain is typically the owner, so we call them owner operators. So those people are basically self-employed people that own their own business as an owner operator of their own vessel. Now, when you get into the bigger vessels, the huge scallop boats down in Gloucester and New Bedford that are 120 to 180 feet, those are typically not owned, not captained by the owner. So what we're doing is we're taking the deckhands off the back of the boats who have at least 3 years experience working as a deckhand on either a fishing boat, a scallop boat, or a lobster boat, and we're training them how to become a successful owner operator. And it's not teaching them how to tie lines and read electronics. It's teaching them how to write a business plan, how to do a budget, how to we have fisheries friendly lenders coming in. It's a 9-month program. It's like a big fat fish baby, right? So it's a 9-month program where we're just training folks to be successful owner operators. And we ask young fishermen and women, and most importantly, their wives and girlfriends, typically fisher folks are men, but we ask the wives and girlfriends at a scoping exercise before we started, what is it that you need? And we basically developed this program based on what they said they needed. And I threw in a few things that I felt they needed, like public speaking and industry and regulation compliance as well.
I'd like to move on, but I'd love for you to quickly talk about why is public speaking training important for your fisher folks that you're training?
So we don't have any lobbyists or any unions in the fishing industry. And again, I am talking about small and medium-sized boats, so basically 50 feet or less. So fishermen and women have to be their own advocates, and they have to show up at regulatory meetings and advocate for themselves. I oftentimes get media requests, and you've usually got one fisherman who you can ask to do the media request, and everyone else is really camera shy. So it's really important for fishermen and women to be able to express themselves, express the concerns of their industry, and be able to advocate for their industry on their own.
I think that's so incredible, not just because I'm a communications person, but I find that one of the things missing often in business development for people is communication and advocacy and figuring out how to tell the story of what you're trying to do in a succinct way. And it's one of the biggest fears too of human beings, next to spiders, is public speaking. So you have a question, another question in the chat?
I think Stephanie maybe had a question.
It was more, I did put it in the chat, but right now, in the state of New Hampshire, there are 28 briefs being, authored by expertise in 28 different departments of the New Hampshire Food and Strategic Agricultural Plan. And, to see those briefs in development, and they're open to public comment. If you go to New Hampshire Food Alliance, I did put it, it's newhampshirefoodalliance.org. This is a really important time in New Hampshire food and agriculture to voice public opinion, to become involved. All of the briefs are released at once. And Kearsarge Food Hub, you folks were, or Sweet Beets, pretty much my guess is that a lot of people here that are, everything from the farmer to middle chain, producers, processors to cooperative markets. The intention of these briefs are not just fluffy stuff for people to be like, oh yeah, that's all great. And sure, we're hoping that this moves the needle in policy making. It's really important that the general public submit any open, and there, like I said, there's probably 6. I think the last time I checked that 6 are open for public comment. If any questions that any of us can have here right now, it's an incredible moment. These are going to be released in 2025 and will help move the needle in our state in every aspect of food and agriculture in our state. And so I highly recommend everybody here get involved and tell your friends, colleagues, passerby. This is a great moment to become involved because we have expertise in 28 different departments of agriculture and food in our state.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It is really incredible being the very first time that this is happening in our state. And it has been born of a collaboration between New England, actually, all of the states, and in the near future, we're hoping that every state in New England is going to have their own strategic plan. And so this is really really an incredible opportunity for creating a collective vision that we can move towards regionally. And we were very honored to be invited as the Kearsarge Food Hub to be subject matter experts on a couple of the briefs. And we've been sharing a little bit about when and how to chime in as you can on these things.
Yes, and thank you for the reminder. That seems like a great link to include in the follow-up from this evening. So folks who have expertise, many of the food system experts here tonight are already participating in these brief areas. And what's going to happen is recommendations being made and figuring out who's going to carry forth what recommendation. A lot of great stuff happens in community conversation, and I'm sure in politics behind closed doors, but then it doesn't often translate to action, I feel like. And so figuring out through these recommendations from the experts who needs to take leadership over what zone and actually enact it in our state. It's going to be really exciting to see how that plays out.
It is.
For sure. We do have a question for Fresh Start Farms.
Yeah.
Tom, hello. Perhaps you can answer this for us. What cultural vegetables do you grow to help the farmers grow and sell? And what are your best sellers?
Hey, that's a great question. And thank you for inviting us into this. I've learned a lot in coming into this. This has been really terrific. I manage the training half of things, so I don't have sales data, so I'm not sure what would be the best seller. My colleague Gene is in our chat, and he actually helps some of the farmers markets, so he might be able to chime in on it. But some of the culturally connected foods that our farmers grow are African eggplant or garden egg. They're it actually was in the video, the round vegetables, African corn, amaranth, sour. So it's really interesting because I think it probably depends too on the market itself. We support the farmers in accessing a variety of different markets. So I know we did a event a few months ago called Morning Star. There's a condominium apartment complex in Concord that has a lot of our farmers and their families and other people who are in the East African communities in Concord, who are a huge customer base for our farmers. And we had a farmers market event there, and people were taking bags of the stuff with them. So it can be, I think it kind of depends on that versus I know through the Food Hub, there is a lot of it is more of the traditional kind of American vegetables, fruits and vegetables. What do you, I don't know, Gene, are you still in here? What would you say is probably the most popular item?
Thank you, Tom. I think you've already said everything. So our farmers are from 7 countries now. A lot of them are from Africa. We have also farmers from Nepal in Asia, and we grow a variety of American crop and culturally appropriate crops from Africa and Asia as well. So we have some varieties like amaranth. I don't know if some people know that. We have African eggplants, as you said. We have also African corn and so much more. I don't know if it's Anna who talked about challenges that refugees are facing in New Hampshire, trying to grow produce here. There is what did she say is really accurate, but I can add also the challenge of language. Some of them don't speak English at all. Some of them are struggling. There's also land access. That also is another challenge. The climate is also another challenge here because they are coming from a very different, far different climate. So when it comes cold or very hot, it's so challenging here because the climate can go to the extremity here in New England. So that's what I can add right now.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm with an organization called Helpings of Hope, and I think we believe that you're our sister farm because we're from Indianapolis, Indiana, and so we raise 4 African vegetables. The amaranth, or Swahili is linga-linga, and sour leaf, and then the African eggplant. So we'll definitely, if I can get in touch with you, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, we have all of those and much more.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers.
If there can be relationships built from this evening, even just one, we will consider this an enormous success.
I have goosebumps. I'm not kidding.
One thing that we had to trim from the Food Connects video is kind of how the market that Food Connects is providing, the market opportunities for farmers kind of exists alongside other existing markets. Seth had mentioned kind of some studies coming out about how farmers markets are not exactly that viable for a farm business. We know that they're an incredibly important part of, our communities and of farm operations. But Richard, would you like to speak to just a little bit about how your offerings at Food Connects complements existing direct markets for farmers and how you work with farmers to help them decide how to grow their markets?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the Brattleboro Farmers Market has been around for quite a long time and is pretty popular and well known. And a lot of the farms, that we worked with in the very beginning of starting the Food Hub had said, yeah, this is great. The farmers market's great. And we keep getting more and more farms coming to the farmers market. And, we're actually losing a little bit of market share. So they were looking to add some wholesale to it. And, I think also at the same time, there was a lot more interest and demand from consumers to buy farmers market type products at other places other than the farmers market, at retailers, at stores, especially in rural areas, and at co-ops and other places. So clearly, there was a sense from farmers that sold at farmers market that it was saturated and direct markets were saturated and they wanted something new. Also, it seems like the Brattleboro area is a place where a lot of young farmers come to. There's a lot of support. The more experienced farmers seem to be very generous with their time and knowledge and whatnot. And so a lot of young farmers do come to this area. And then, that added to the saturation of the direct markets. So really seemed like there was a need for expanding wholesale opportunities. So for some farms, we actually kind of just sell their surplus. They're planning to sell in their farmers market, or they're planning to sell in their farm stand. And if they happen, a lot of farms grow more than they need because there can be crop loss or, other challenges that they face. So they want to make sure that there's enough food on the farm, but then they don't want to just plow that food under. They want to have new markets for it. So that's one way that we work with farms, especially for like perishable item or less perishable items. Storage crops are a good example of that. And so we're able to create new markets for them. And then value-added products are another example where, a farm can sell to their farm stand or to the farmer's market. And, let's say they're going to invest in some equipment for manufacturing, or processing tomato sauce or whatever it is. If they can find other markets as well, they're just leveraging some labor and leveraging their investments. And so creating new opportunities through wholesale. So it's for many farmers, it's a mix of, selling direct and selling wholesale. And we try to communicate with them and talk about pricing. And, one of the hardest conversations is telling a farmer they're not going to get the same amount of revenue selling direct or selling to a wholesaler. And, we put a markup on it and then Sweet Beet puts a markup on it. So it's just not the same. We all have to cover our costs, but we're ending up finding new customers. So I also say to a lot of people, we're not for everyone. And, that's a conversation we have with farmers that we might not work for you. There's a model that we have, and we try to be as transparent as we can, so that it's clear ahead of time. Yeah, I can go on and on. I'll stop there. Hopefully I answered it.
Well, it seems to be there's certainly room to grow to build out the markets so that folks can choose. And something that we also cut out of the video that McKenna mentioned is farmers, growers might not account for the time that they spend packing up their vehicles, going to markets, the degradation on vehicles, all of the things that you guys kind of absorb. So while the immediate price for their goods might be less in terms of selling wholesale, kind of there might be a long-term benefit of not having to go and be in those markets themselves. Though, of course, the diversity of markets is what's going to make our local and regional food system viable. So,
yeah,
thank you for your work.
I want to share something that was shared in the chat about some of the hidden things that we don't see in the global system, food system. It's shared by Erica Hiller, who is a partner of ours at Vital Communities. Hi, Erica. Yeah, it's got some heaviness to it. But another aspect of the importance of buying local when it comes to seafood is the still rampant practice of forced labor or slavery in the global fishing industry. In 2016, the AP published a really important investigative piece on slavery in the fishing industry in Southeast Asia and how that seafood is making its way to US markets. 2,000 plus people were freed in the process, but it is still a very, very real problem. That Pulitzer Prize winning piece of journalism was made into a book called Fishermen Slaves, Human Trafficking, and the Seafood We Eat. So it's just another, I think an important thing to hear and to host together and to remember that we really do have an impact. And I know it's really hard. Peter Bauer's on the call, and I remember him saying, he's a vegetarian and, he doesn't think he's going to change the world with that decision. But I do think that the choices we make with the food that we choose to eat, it does all add up every single day. And this is one of those impacts that can hit maybe a little closer to the heart because we can feel the compassion and the severity of that.
And Andrea, you did speak to this when we met, so why don't you go ahead and speak to it now?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that. So that's what I'm talking about, folks. And thank you for correcting me on the IUU, Hannah. I realized I had misspoken that. So there is a lot of slave labor in the international seafood industry, particularly on squid boats out of China. That's a real big one, fishing off the Faroe Islands. And most recently, most of our shrimp is on the top 10 most frequently eaten seafoods by Americans. Most of our shrimp is coming from ponds in India and Vietnam. And there has just been a story that busted this week that a lot of that Indian shrimp culture is being done by what is considered slave labor. So it is really important to ask your server, if you're out at the restaurant, where is my seafood coming from? And you don't want to know the broker who is giving the restaurant the seafood. Hannah and I had this experience going out to eat actually on the seacoast. You want to know the origin of your seafood. And a lot of our shrimp is imported. So that's just another product that is red listed right now is, shrimp from India. I was wondering, could I make a comment on the overfishing comment in the chat? Great. So I appreciate that too. One of the things we're really working on with New England Young Fishermen's Alliance is the stigmatization of the fishing industry here in the United States. So we are the 7th most regulated industry here in the United States behind, nuclear power plants, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare. Okay. We are governed by the Department of Commerce, NOAA. Under NOAA is the National Marine Fisheries Service. So our catch is so strictly monitored, enforced, and watched that by default, we are fishing sustainably here in the United States without a doubt. That is not a contested fact, because we are fishing according to what the National Marine Fisheries Service says we can catch. The problem is the National Marine Fisheries Service defines a stock as overfished if fishermen numbers are coming up slightly over what National Marine Fisheries Service said you can fish for in that fishing year. The stock is defined by that term overfished. It doesn't mean that the fishermen are intentionally overfishing the stock. It means that the regulators underestimated what the fishermen could have caught. So that's a really important thing for folks to remember, because a lot of ENGOs, I'm a big environmentalist, but ENGOs have really given the fishing industry a really bad name, unfortunately, by taking that terminology that is a definition, and we're trying to get that change within the National Marine Fisheries Service. And that's just defining the stock with the term overfish. So if a layperson reads that, they're going to say overfish. And to your question about overfishing, yes, several third world countries are overfishing our oceans because they don't have the regulations or the infrastructure in place to monitor and implement policy like we do. Just so everyone knows, the ground fishing industry here in northern New England, you either have to have an electronic monitor on your vessel or a human observer on your vessel. So there's no way to cheat. There's no way to overfish in northern New England. I say that with much fact and much confidence, because these guys are being monitored, 24/7. If it's not an electronic monitoring device on their vessel, there is a human being on the vessel making sure what they write down on their catch reports is indeed what they've caught. So real quickly, the other issue is our regulations and policy management system here in the United States under the National Marine Fisheries Service is about 3 years behind, and I'm sure we see this in agriculture as well. So for instance, when they're doing a stock assessment on, say, pollock, and they're collecting the data in order to implement the total allowable catch for the year, it's incredibly, heavy science. It's really statistically checked by several different marine scientists within the National Marine Fisheries Service. But oftentimes those stock assessments, once the data is crunched, the policy is developed, and then the policy is implemented for the total allowable catch, we're oftentimes 2 or 3 years down the road from when when those samples have been taken. So there's a real disconnect with the sampling dates and the time that the policy is implemented, which ends up with that misnomer term overfishing. Thank you. I could talk about it all night. Thank you.
Andrea, passion, your expertise. We're so grateful to have you here tonight to speak to it.
And the nuance of it, right? Like, we all want to protect our oceans. We all here on this call certainly are environmentalists. We care about our oceans. We care about our land. But one of the maybe spoken and or unforeseen consequences of some of the regulations is to outprice small and medium scale boats, who I think, not to generalize, but by nature, when you're running a smaller medium scale operation, you don't have as many opportunity to outsource and to disrupt ecosystems. And so, as I spoke to your fishermen in your deckhand and training class, they're naturally environmentalists of the sea if they want their business to thrive. And I think with the economies of scale that happen in the food system and fisheries, we get disconnected from the fact that environmentalism is economic well-being, and we can kind of delay the costs that we're paying at a larger and larger scale, but ultimately it catches up with you. And ultimately also we're outsourcing those costs through things like forced labor and modern day slavery, which is just completely unacceptable.
Yeah. Here we are.
There are a couple more questions in the chat about specifics about bycatch and seafood industry, and I definitely recommend folks to reach out to each other in the chat. We'll send, if folks agree, our featured experts here tonight, we can send contact information so that people can get in touch, stay in touch, keep the conversation going. Are there any last hand raises or anything that folks want to chime in on? Burning questions that you'd like to ask tonight, or comments?
Yeah.
Comments, thoughts. Stephanie, would you like to go ahead and chime in?
Well, I'm just so grateful that you took this moment for the local love to address middle chain in the local food economy and our food web, because it's in the middle, like anything else. There's the configuration of the figure outables from the source to then logistics in the middle, like Richard and Food Connects, and then also Fresh Start, and then also Andrea. Like, these important parts in the middle often are, I don't want to say forgotten, but so much of the sustainability of the local food web depends on middle chain. And I'm not saying that because we're middle chain, we are, but I think we stand in a very important part in this whole conversation that often is, I don't want to say forgotten about, but I'm just really happy that you brought it as a highlight to this conversation today. And I'm so honored to be here and see all of these faces, and I feel incredibly optimistic. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll hear from Steve, and we're not done yet. So
Settle
stick
down,
around. We have
settle
8
down.
more minutes with you. So stick around. Steve, go ahead and ask your question or your thought. And you're muted.
We had to say it once.
Sorry about that. This has been wonderful tonight. I chimed on just to support in the beginning, figuring I'd watch for a little while, but I've been riveted. And Hannah, you've really done your magic with the videos. And so one suggestion is, and then maybe you're going to do this, is put it on Yankee Chronicle and have it play over and over and over again, so that the people in the community can see this and get some sense of the statistics and stuff, which I had no idea. And so that part was great. The second question I have is, you had asked the question, who shops at Sweet Peat Market? And I do when I'm in the area, but 30 minutes each way is too far to drive to buy. And I didn't know if you thought about, and there's a lot of people with excess income in London and in the area. I didn't know if there's other distribution channels that you have for your food, whether it's out of the back of a truck or with Greg at Spring Ledge or other ways, because I know that we would definitely, for the seafood and the other products, we would buy it, but it just doesn't make sense to drive all the way to Bradford.
I mean, I think Spring Ledge Farm is always trying to do a bit more to be similar to Sweet Pea Market. They do it a slightly different way, but I think advocating to Greg for the products that you're looking for, because he's already running a thriving, incredible community center and food hub in its own right. And so that's my first thought. As for us and the future of the food hub, we're always cooking something up, but I don't have an immediate, we'll be in New London soon.
And we have business plans for every Kearsarge area town. We beat every town.
Yeah.
All jokes aside, we've always thought about we are just one example of many. And of course, as we mentioned, Richard provided a blueprint for us when we started how to offer, either consulting or actual blueprints for folks to create and operate something like a Sweet Beet in every town, so that it's 30 miles each way, is, you're right, completely untenable for people to go food shopping every week. So that's a question that's going to be in the back of our mind forevermore as we move forward with our work at the Kearsarge Food Hub. It's never enough time to spend with you all at Love Local. We even increased the time from 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and still there's so much more that we could talk about. But we are going to wrap up tonight. I know you're all dying to know what are the top 3 actions that we can take tonight, tomorrow, to move forward on the issues that we talked about tonight. And you're in luck because we've given it some thought and we have some ideas. So number 1 would be to shop local. You might not have a Sweet Beet in your town, but there's one nearby. And as Richard said, $10 more a week on local food goes a really long way. And I don't know about you guys, but I was just watching TV the other day and watching these commercials, and it's consumerism this, consumerism that, buy this, buy that. Imagine the amount of money people are spending this time of year. Imagine the impact if we turn to our local markets, if we ordered our holiday turkeys from Sweet Beet and our sides from Sweet Beet, or went to your favorite farmer's market and bought a CSA, a winter CSA, a summer CSA for your loved ones this holiday season. That would make a huge difference. So please shop local. Number 2, be an ambassador. Yes, we're going to share this recording with you and follow up. You will be hearing from us. Share it with 3 people. Send me an email, hannah@kearsargefoodhub.org. Let me know how I can share this message with more people. The conversation does not end here. It is really, truly the beginning. Our featured organizations, your videos are your videos. Please share them with your networks. Share your message. That's so important. And number 3 is donate your money this holiday season, this year end. Every organization on this call that we featured is a nonprofit organization. We will be sending you contact information to them. They will happily receive your tax exempt donation, as well as us here at the Kearsarge Food Hub. We are a nonprofit, and we will be launching our Season of Gratitude and Giving fundraiser tomorrow. Everyone on this call can be the first to donate and have your gift matched dollar for dollar in our annual fundraiser, where we're raising $60,000 to support our nonprofit work in bringing events like this to you and living rooms everywhere. actually have a sneaky fourth
Sneaky
call
fourth.
to action tonight, which is to take the namesake of this event and implement it in your community. Love local. And that starts with ourselves. Take care of yourself. This is hard times. There's a lot going on. Take care of yourself. Take care of your neighbors. Love your community and show up when and how you can. And that goes a really long way.
As Hannah said, we will definitely be following up with everyone tomorrow with all of the information that you need to reflect on our time together and to take action moving forward. Thank you all so much for an incredible night. I want to thank all of our feature organizations for their incredible work, for gifting us your time as we came and did the videos, and for being here with us tonight. I also want to thank our director and filmmaker for doing an incredible job putting these videos together. It's a heck of a lot of hard work.
Thank you.
I absolutely want to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. Micro Mamas, thank you. Walden Mutual Bank, thank you. And Sugar River Bank as well. Everyone who is here tonight, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. You don't know what it means to us that you are willing to take 2 whole hours out of your very special Tuesday evening to be here with us. I see so many donors here tonight. I also see so many Sweetbee Market and Cafe patrons. Thank you for deepening your investment in our community by being here tonight. Finally, I want to thank all of our Kearsarge Food Hub board members, our team, our incredible team that is doing all of the work every single day, and the many volunteers that make everything that we do possible. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.